The gunshot echoed across Rawhide, Nevada, in the spring of 1875, shattering the early morning calm as Lillian Cooper clutched her newborn son to her chest and ran through the dusty streets, her heart pounding louder than the approaching hoofbeats behind her. She'd never thought her life would come to this, fleeing from the man who had once welcomed her into the family. The man who now claimed ownership over her like she was nothing more than another piece of property left behind by his deceased brother. Lillian's legs burned as she darted between buildings, her calico dress dirty and torn at the hem. Baby Joseph was mercifully quiet, perhaps sensing the danger they were in. 6 weeks had passed since her husband Thomas's death, 6 weeks of mourning interrupted by his brother's unwanted advances and bizarre claims that by frontier law she now belonged to him. "Lillian," the voice bellowed from down the street, "you can't run from me." Thomas would have wanted his son raised proper with family. She ducked into the livery stable, pressing herself against the rough wooden wall, trying to catch her breath. The baby squirmed against her chest as she peered through a crack between the boards. Harold Cooper's imposing figure stalked down the main street, rifle in hand, his face contorted with fury. At 35, he was 7 years older than Thomas had been, with the same chestnut hair but none of his brother's kindness. "Miss Lillian." A whispered voice behind her made her jump. She whirled around to find Danny, the stable boy, his young face concerned. "You all right? He's hunting me," she whispered back, her voice breaking. "He says I'm his now that Thomas is gone. He tried to take Joseph from me." Danny's eyes widened. "That ain't right. You stay here." "I know someone who can help." Before she could respond, the boy slipped out the back of the stable. Lillian sank down onto a hay bale, rocking her baby gently. She was 23 years old, a widow with a newborn in a frontier town hundreds of miles from her childhood home in Missouri. She had arrived in Rawhide as a mail-order bride just 14 months ago, falling genuinely in love with Thomas Cooper, a kind shopkeeper who treated her with respect from the moment she'd stepped off the stage. Now he was gone, taken by a fever that had swept through town, and his older brother seemed determined to claim everything he'd left behind, including her. The stable door creaked open and Lillian froze, clutching Joseph tighter. Relief flooded her when she saw it was only Danny returning, but her breath caught when she noticed the tall man following behind him. "Miss Cooper, this here's Mr. Isaiah O'Malley," Danny said. "He runs the Circle O Ranch outside town. If anyone can help you, it's him." Isaiah O'Malley removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair that fell just past his ears. His face was weathered from years under the Nevada sun, but his eyes were a startling blue that reminded Lillian of the summer sky back home. He couldn't have been much older than 30, but something about his demeanor suggested he'd lived enough for 2 lifetimes. "Madam," he said, his voice low and gentle, "Danny says you're in trouble." Lillian stood shakily, still holding Joseph close. "My brother-in-law. He says that since my husband died, I'm his property now. He tried to take my son this morning." Her voice caught. "I don't know what frontier law says about widows, but there's no law anywhere that makes you any man's property," Isaiah interrupted, his jaw tightening. "Not in this territory or any other in America." The baby began to fuss and Lillian gently rocked him, trying to keep him quiet. "He won't stop. He says Thomas would have wanted his brother to look after us, but that's not what he means. He's already tried to." She couldn't finish the sentence. Isaiah's eyes darkened. "Where are you staying now?" "We had rooms above Thomas's store, but Harold's there now. He took over the business before Thomas was even cold in his grave. I've been staying with Mrs. Peterson, but I'm afraid he'll cause trouble for her too." Isaiah exchanged a look with Danny. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside town. I've got a small cabin where my foreman used to stay before he got married and moved on. It's nothing fancy, but you and your boy would be safe there until we sort this out." "I can't ask you to do that," Lillian protested. "You don't even know me." "I knew your husband. Thomas Cooper was a fair man who extended credit to my cowboys when they were short, never charged interest either." Isaiah offered a small smile. "Besides, in Rawhide we look after our own." A shout from outside made them all tense. Harold's voice carried through the walls. "Check the stable. She can't have gone far with the baby." Isaiah moved quickly. "Danny, saddle my horse and the bay mare. Quick now." He turned back to Lillian. "Can you ride?" "Yes, but Joseph, I've got away." He unwound the bandana from his neck. "My sister had 2 little ones. She showed me how to make a sling." With deft movements that surprised her, he fashioned a makeshift carrier from his bandana and helped her secure the baby against her chest. Danny returned with the horses just as the stable door banged open at the front of the building. "Get on," Isaiah whispered, helping her onto the mare. "Follow me out the back. Keep your head down and don't stop for anything." Lillian swung into the saddle with practiced ease despite her long absence from horseback. Thomas had been a city man, with little cause for riding. The familiar motion brought back memories of her childhood farm, one of the few comforts from a life that now seemed a lifetime ago. They slipped out the back of the stable just as Harold's voice boomed from the front. Isaiah led them down a narrow alleyway, keeping their pace steady to avoid drawing attention. Only when they reached the edge of town did he signal for them to urge the horses into a gallop. The desert landscape of Nevada stretched before them, a vast expanse of scrubland and distant mountains. Joseph, miraculously, had fallen asleep against her chest, secured by Isaiah's improvised sling. Lillian felt the first moment of relief she'd experienced in weeks as Rawhide grew smaller behind them. They rode for nearly an hour, following a winding trail that led through rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. Eventually, a cluster of buildings appeared on the horizon, the Circle O Ranch. As they drew closer, Lillian could see a main house constructed of sturdy logs, a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse. Off to one side stood a small cabin, smoke curling from its chimney. "Mrs. Abernathy must have lit a fire," Isaiah explained, noticing Lillian's gaze. "She's our cook. I sent word ahead with one of my men who was in town this morning." "You were so certain I'd come with you?" Lillian asked, surprised. Isaiah's expression softened. "No, madam, I just hoped you would. Nobody should face trouble alone." He helped her dismount and carefully took Joseph from her to allow her to stretch her aching muscles. She watched, touched, as the tall cowboy cradled her son with surprising tenderness. "You're good with him," she observed. "Like I said, my sister has 2 little ones. They visit sometimes." He handed Joseph back to her. "Come on, let's get you both settled." The cabin was small but clean, with a main room containing a table, 2 chairs, and a small sofa, plus a bedroom with a neatly made bed. A fire burned cheerfully in the stone fireplace, and Lillian saw that someone had left a basket of food on the table. "It's not much," Isaiah said, suddenly seeming uncertain. "It's perfect," Lillian assured him, feeling tears spring to her eyes. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, the simple cabin felt like a sanctuary. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks." Isaiah shifted his weight, hat in hand. "I'll have one of the boys bring your things from Mrs. Peterson's later today, if you'll write down what you need." "And Harold?" she asked, the fear creeping back into her voice. Isaiah's expression hardened. "Let me worry about Harold Cooper. You just rest and take care of your boy." After he left, Lillian sat on the edge of the bed, Joseph sleeping peacefully beside her. For the first time since Thomas's death, she allowed herself to really cry for her lost husband. for her uncertain future, and with relief at having found an unexpected ally in this harsh frontier world. Isaiah returned to town alone, his mind occupied with thoughts of Lillian and her situation. In his 15 years in Nevada, he'd seen plenty of hardship and injustice, but there was something about a man trying to claim ownership of a woman that struck him as particularly despicable. As he rode into Rawhide, he spotted Sheriff Mills outside the jailhouse and guided his horse in that direction. "Isaiah," the sheriff greeted him, chewing thoughtfully on a toothpick. "Heard there was some commotion this morning with the Cooper widow." Isaiah dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Harold Cooper seems to think his brother's death gives him rights to the widow and child. She's frightened enough that she ran," Mills sighed, removing the toothpick. At 50, he was one of the oldest residents of Rawhide, having come west during the Silver Rush 20 years earlier. "Harold's in the saloon, raising hell about someone stealing his family. I told him I don't enforce property claims on people." "Good. Because she's not property and she sure as hell isn't his." Isaiah's voice was quiet but firm. "She's staying at my ranch for now." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "That's bound to cause talk. Let it. She's got a cabin to herself and Mrs. Abernathy will be there during the days." Isaiah leaned against the jailhouse wall. "Thomas Cooper was a good man. I won't see his widow and child mistreated." "Fair enough." Mills replaced his toothpick. "But Harold's got friends here, and he's been saying he has papers something Thomas signed giving him guardianship of the child and management of his affairs if anything happened." Isaiah frowned. "Does he actually have these papers?" "He claims they're at the store. I haven't seen them myself." The sheriff shrugged. "Even if he does, they wouldn't give him any rights over Mrs. Cooper herself. The baby, though, that might be more complicated." "I'll speak with Judge Wilson when he comes through next week," Isaiah decided. "In the meantime, I'd appreciate you keeping an eye on Harold. If he tries to come out to my place, I'll warn you," Mills promised. "And Isaiah, be careful. Harold Cooper wasn't always the most stable even before his brother died. Thomas was the one who kept him in check." With that sobering thought, Isaiah made his way to Mrs. Peterson's boarding house to arrange for Lillian's belongings to be sent to the ranch. The elderly widow greeted him warmly, clearly relieved to hear that Lillian had found safe accommodation. "That poor girl," Mrs. Peterson said as she helped gather Lillian's meager possessions. Thomas wasn't even gone a day before Harold started making his intentions clear. Said it was the old way for a man to marry his brother's widow. Isaiah paused in folding a dress. "Did Thomas ever indicate he wanted Harold to look after his wife and child?" Mrs. Peterson snorted. "Thomas Cooper barely tolerated his brother. He only brought him into the business because their mother begged him to give Harold a chance after he lost yet another job in California." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, I think Thomas regretted it. Harold's got a mean streak when he drinks, and lately, that's been most days." By the time Isaiah returned to the Circle, the sun was beginning to set. He found Lillian sitting on the small porch of the cabin, Joseph asleep in her arms. She changed into a simple blue dress, her dark blonde hair loose around her shoulders rather than in the tight bun she'd worn earlier. "I spoke with the sheriff," he told her, settling into the chair beside her. "He won't help Harold, but he mentioned something about papers Thomas might have signed." Lillian's face paled. "Thomas was very ill at the end. Harold brought papers for him to sign, said they were for the store. Thomas trusted him." Her voice broke. "I never saw what they actually said." Isaiah watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. "Judge Wilson will be in Rawhide next week. We'll sort it out then. And if the papers give him rights to Joseph," her arms tightened protectively around her sleeping baby, "we'll fight it," Isaiah said simply. I promise you that. The next few days established a rhythm at the Circle O. Lillian, determined not to be merely a charity case, insisted on helping Mrs. Abernathy with cooking for the ranch hands. The older woman initially protested, but soon came to appreciate Lillian's skill with bread making and her willingness to learn the cowboy's preferences. Isaiah found himself looking forward to returning to the main house each evening, where Lillian now took meals with him and his foreman, Luke Daniels. She was intelligent and well-spoken, with a quiet strength that impressed him more each day. Despite her circumstances, she rarely complained, focusing instead on caring for Joseph and making herself useful. On the fourth evening, after Luke had retired to the bunkhouse, Isaiah and Lillian lingered at the table with cups of coffee. "Tell me about yourself," she said unexpectedly. "You know my whole sad story, but I know almost nothing about you." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Not much to tell. Came west from Pennsylvania after the war, worked as a hand on ranches from Texas to Montana before winning this place in a poker game 8 years ago." "You won a ranch in a poker game?" Lillian's eyes widened. It wasn't much of a ranch then, just the main house and 100 acres with a few sorry-looking cattle. He chuckled at the memory. "The previous owner was more interested in prospecting than ranching. I built it up, bought more land when I could." "And no wife?" she asked, then immediately blushed. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "It's a fair question," he replied easily. "No wife. Came close once about 5 years ago. Catherine was a schoolteacher in Carson City. We corresponded for nearly a year while she taught there, and I built this place up." His expression grew distant. "Her parents fell ill back east. She went home to care for them and decided to stay. Last I heard, she married a banker." Lillian touched his hand briefly. "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "It worked out for the best. Ranching is a hard life for a woman used to city comforts." "Some women are stronger than they appear," she observed quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, a moment of understanding, perhaps, or the first hint of something deeper. Isaiah broke the connection first, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation, despite Mrs. Abernathy's presence during the days and Lillian's separate quarters. "I should check on the horses," he said, standing abruptly. "Good night, Mrs. Cooper." "Lillian," she corrected him gently. "After all you've done, I think you can use my given name." He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Good night, Lillian." "Good night, Isaiah." The peaceful routine was shattered the next morning when one of the ranch hands rode in at a gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. "Boss," he called as Isaiah emerged from the barn. Harold Cooper and 3 men just rode past the south boundary line. "They're headed this way and they're armed." Isaiah's expression hardened. "Get Luke and the boys. Rifles, but no shooting unless absolutely necessary." He turned toward the cabin where Lillian was hanging laundry, having heard the commotion. "Get inside and lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." She quickly gathered Joseph from his basket and hurried into the cabin. Isaiah checked his revolver, then positioned himself on the porch of the main house, Luke and 4 cowboys spreading out around the yard. They didn't wait long before 4 riders appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Harold Cooper led the group, his face flushed with anger or whiskey, possibly both. Behind him rode 3 men Isaiah recognized from town. Simmons, who worked at the livery, Parker, a drifter who'd been hanging around Rawhide for a few months, and Bennett, who ran the saloon. All 4 were armed, though only Harold had his rifle drawn. "O'Malley," Harold shouted as they reined in about 30 yards from the house. "You've got something that belongs to me." Isaiah stepped off the porch, his hand resting near his holstered revolver. "There's nothing here that belongs to you, Cooper. Turn around and go back to town before this gets ugly." Harold's face contorted with rage. My brother's widow and son are here and they're coming back with me. I've got legal papers giving me guardianship of the boy. Any papers signed by a dying man who didn't know what he was signing don't mean much to me, Isaiah replied calmly. And even if the court honors them regarding the child, they give you no claim on Mrs. Cooper herself. She's my brother's wife. Tradition says she's my responsibility now. Isaiah took a step forward, his voice dropping dangerously. She doesn't belong to anyone. She's a free woman who can make her own choices, and she's chosen not to go with you. The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the air. Isaiah was acutely aware of Lillian and Joseph in the cabin, of his men positioned around the yard with rifles at the ready, of how quickly this could turn deadly. Bennett, the saloon keeper, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Harold, maybe we should take this to the judge when he comes through. This ain't worth bloodshed. Shut up, Harold snapped, but Isaiah could see doubt beginning to creep into the faces of the other men. Your friends seem to be reconsidering Cooper, Isaiah observed. Judge Wilson will be in Rawhide on Tuesday. We can all state our case then. Until that time, Mrs. Cooper and her son are staying here as my guests. Harold's gaze darted between Isaiah and his increasingly reluctant companions. Finally, he lowered his rifle slightly. This ain't over, O'Malley, not by a long shot. For today it is, Isaiah replied firmly. Now get off my land. With a final venomous glare, Harold wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his companions following more slowly. Isaiah watched until they disappeared from sight, then let out a long breath. Luke, send 2 men to keep watch at the boundary. I don't trust him not to double back. Luke nodded, dispatching the riders immediately. Isaiah walked to Lillian's cabin, knocking gently on the door. It's safe now. She opened the door, her face pale but composed. Joseph was sleeping in her arms, undisturbed by the confrontation that had just taken place. I heard, she said quietly. He's not going to give up, is he? Isaiah shook his head. Probably not, but we'll be ready for him on Tuesday when the judge arrives. That evening, after Joseph had been fed and put down for the night, Lillian joined Isaiah on the small porch of her cabin. The air was cool, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Neither spoke for several minutes, content in the peaceful silence. Thank you, Lillian finally said, for standing up to him like that, for saying I don't belong to anyone. Isaiah turned to look at her, his expression serious. I meant it. No person should own another, not a husband, not a brother-in-law, not anyone. Thomas wasn't like that, she said softly. He was kind. We had a good marriage, short as it was. I'm glad. Isaiah hesitated, then asked, How did you come to marry him, if you don't mind my asking? Lillian leaned back in her chair, her gaze distant. My father died when I was 16. Mother and I struggled to keep our small farm going, but eventually we lost it to the bank. We moved to St. Louis to live with her sister, but there was barely enough room and Mother's health was failing. She sighed. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper, a shopkeeper in Nevada seeking a bride. He sounded respectable and he offered to send train fare. Thomas, Isaiah said. She nodded. We exchanged letters for 2 months. He was honest about what life would be like here, about his business, about what he expected in a wife. I liked his directness, his lack of flowery promises. A faint smile crossed her face. When I arrived, he was exactly as he described himself. We were married the next day by the local minister. It wasn't love at first sight, but respect grew into affection and eventually into something deeper. You were fortunate, Isaiah observed. Not all mail-order marriages work out so well. I know. Lillian's hand moved protectively to her stomach, where just months ago Joseph had grown. We were happy when we learned about the baby. Thomas was so proud, already making plans. Her voice caught. Then the fever came through town. He was gone within a week. Isaiah reached out, hesitating only briefly before covering her hand with his. I'm sorry. She turned her hand to clasp his, the simple human connection a comfort in the gathering darkness. What frightens me most is the thought of Joseph growing up like his uncle. Harold was always unsettling. Thomas said their father was a harsh man who believed in ruling his family with fear. It shaped Harold more than him. That won't happen to Joseph, Isaiah promised. Not while I have anything to say about it. They sat together until the stars fully emerged, hands still joined, neither feeling the need to break the gentle silence that enveloped them. The days leading up to the judge's arrival passed in tense anticipation. Isaiah doubled the watch around the ranch, unwilling to risk Harold making another attempt to take Lillian and Joseph by force. Despite the tension, these days also saw a deepening connection between Lillian and Isaiah, built on quiet conversations and shared meals, on his gentle way with Joseph and her growing confidence in her new surroundings. On Monday evening, the night before they were to meet Judge Wilson, Isaiah found Lillian in the garden behind the main house. She was picking late-season tomatoes for Mrs. Abernathy, Joseph sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. You've settled in well, he observed, helping her gather the ripe fruit. It feels more like home than anywhere has since I left Missouri, she admitted. The ranch, I mean. Everyone has been so kind. Isaiah placed another tomato in her basket, his fingers brushing hers. You've earned their respect. Mrs. Abernathy says you've got a natural way with cooking, and the hands appreciate the improvements to their meals. She laughed, the sound light and musical in the evening air. I've only added a few recipes. Your Mrs. Abernathy is a treasure. She's certainly taken to you and Joseph. Isaiah paused, suddenly serious. Lillian, about tomorrow, her smile faded. I've been thinking about what to wear. I want to look respectable for the judge, but I don't have many options. You'll look fine, he assured her. But that's not what I wanted to discuss. If things don't go our way, if Judge Wilson upholds Harold's guardianship claim, I want you to know that I'll still help you. We can appeal, or... He hesitated. Or, she prompted. Isaiah took a deep breath. Or we could leave. Take you and Joseph somewhere Harold couldn't find you. California, maybe, or even back east. Lillian's eyes widened. You would do that. Leave your ranch, everything you've built. A ranch is just land and buildings, he said quietly. It can be replaced. She set down her basket, emotions warring on her face. Why? Why would you do so much for us? You barely know me. Isaiah stepped closer, his voice low and earnest. I know enough. I know you're brave and kind. I know you're a good mother who would do anything to protect her son. I know that in just these few days, you've brought more life and warmth to this ranch than it's seen in all the years I've owned it. Lillian's breath caught as she looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that both thrilled and frightened her. Isaiah. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. Before she could respond, Joseph began to fuss in his basket. The moment broken, Lillian stepped back and picked up her son, soothing him with practiced ease. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. Isaiah nodded, understanding all she couldn't say. We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Tuesday dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day in Nevada. Isaiah drove Lillian and Joseph into town in his wagon, both dressed in their best clothes. Mrs. Abernathy had helped Lillian alter one of her dresses for the occasion, a navy blue affair with minimal trim that looked appropriately somber, yet respectable. As they approached Rawhide, Isaiah noticed how Lillian tensed, her arms tightening around Joseph. It will be all right, he assured her, though he couldn't be certain himself. The courthouse was a modest building near the center of town, and a small crowd had already gathered outside. Word of the dispute had spread quickly in the small community, and Isaiah recognized faces from all corners of Rawhide: shopkeepers, ranchers, miners from the outlying areas. Sheriff Mills met them at the entrance. Judge is already inside. So is Harold with his lawyer from Carson City. Isaiah frowned. A lawyer? I wasn't aware we needed legal representation. Judge says you don't necessarily. This is a hearing, not a trial. Mills glanced at Lillian sympathetically. But it might have been wise to have one on your side, too. They entered the courthouse to find Judge Elijah Wilson seated behind a table at the front of the room. At 60, he was a formidable presence with his silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Harold sat to one side with a thin man in an expensive suit, while chairs had been arranged on the opposite side for Lillian and Isaiah. The judge called the hearing to order, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "This is an unusual case," he began. "I understand Mr. Harold Cooper claims guardianship of the minor child Joseph Cooper, based on documents signed by the deceased Thomas Cooper. Mrs. Lillian Cooper contests this claim. Is that correct?" Both parties confirmed this was the case. "Let me see these documents," the judge ordered. Harold's lawyer presented several papers, which the judge examined carefully, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Cooper, these papers do indeed grant you guardianship of the child in the event of your brother's death, as well as control over his business interests. However, they make no mention of any rights over Mrs. Cooper herself. Do you understand this distinction?" Harold shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, Your Honor, but it's traditional for a brother to take responsibility for his brother's widow. I'm only trying to keep the family together as Thomas would have wanted." The judge turned to Lillian. "Mrs. Cooper, when were these documents signed?" 3 days before my husband died, Your Honor," Lillian replied steadily. "He was very ill with fever." Harold brought the papers to his bedside and said they were regarding the store. "I see." The judge stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And did you witness the signing?" "Yes, Your Honor, but Thomas was barely conscious. He trusted his brother and signed where indicated without reading the documents." The courthouse murmured with this revelation. Judge Wilson silenced the room with a stern look before continuing. "Mr. Cooper, do you deny that your brother was seriously ill when he signed these papers?" Harold's face reddened. He knew what he was signing. "He wanted me to look after his son and his business. And his wife," the judge pressed. "Did he specifically request you look after her as well?" "Not in so many words, but yes or no, Mr. Cooper," Harold glared. "No, Your Honor," the judge nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Mrs. Cooper, do you wish to retain custody of your son?" "More than anything, Your Honor," Lillian answered, her voice unwavering despite her visible nervousness. "He's all I have left of my husband. And how do you intend to support the child?" Isaiah spoke up for the first time. "Your Honor, Mrs. Cooper has been assisting with household duties at my ranch. She receives room, board, and wages for her work. She and her son want for nothing." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And the nature of this arrangement, Mr. O'Malley?" "The town seems quite interested in that particular detail." Isaiah met the judge's gaze directly. "Mrs. Cooper has her own cabin on my property. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, is present during the day. There has been no impropriety." Judge Wilson nodded slowly, then turned his attention back to the papers before him. The courtroom was silent as he read through them again, occasionally making notes. Finally, he looked up, his expression grave. "I find myself troubled by the circumstances under which these documents were signed. The law generally holds that contracts entered into when one party is not of sound mind may be considered invalid. He tapped the papers. However, even if I were to uphold these documents, they only grant guardianship of the minor child, not any rights over Mrs. Cooper herself. Harold stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my brother, sit down, Mr. Cooper," the judge ordered sharply. "I have not finished." Harold sank back into his chair, his face flushed with anger. "It is my finding that these documents were obtained under questionable circumstances, with the signatory likely unaware of their full contents due to his illness. As such, I am ruling them invalid. Custody of Joseph Cooper remains with his mother, Lillian Cooper." A ripple of murmurs ran through the courtroom. Lillian clutched Joseph tighter, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "Furthermore," the judge continued, raising his voice slightly, "I am ordering that the ownership of Thomas Cooper's store and business interests be investigated properly. Until such time, Mr. Harold Cooper may continue to operate the business, but all profits must be documented, with appropriate portions set aside for the widow and child." Harold shot to his feet again. "This is outrageous. That business was as much mine as his. I worked there too." "One more outburst, Mr. Cooper, and you'll find yourself in contempt," the judge warned. "If you were an equal partner in the business, you should have no trouble providing documentation to that effect." With that, he banged his gavel, signaling the end of the hearing. Lillian sagged against Isaiah in relief, while Harold stormed from the courtroom, his lawyer hurrying after him. "It's over," Isaiah murmured, helping Lillian to her feet. "You're safe now." But as they exited the courthouse, they found Harold waiting for them on the street, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't finished," he snarled. "That judge doesn't understand our ways." "A child belongs with blood family, not some, that's enough, Cooper," Sheriff Mills interrupted, stepping between them. "The judge has ruled. I suggest you accept it and move on." Harold's gaze shifted to Lillian, his eyes narrowing. "You think you've won? We'll see about that." With a final glare at Isaiah, he stalked away toward the saloon. Mills sighed heavily. "I'd keep an eye out if I were you, O'Malley. Men like Harold don't take defeat gracefully." Isaiah nodded grimly. "We'll be careful." As they drove back to the ranch, the initial elation of their victory was tempered by Harold's threats. Lillian sat quietly beside Isaiah, Joseph sleeping peacefully in her arms, her thoughts clearly troubled. "We should celebrate," Isaiah said, trying to lighten her mood. "Mrs. Abernathy mentioned making a special dinner tonight." Lillian managed a small smile. "That would be nice." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think he meant it, about not being finished?" Isaiah chose his words carefully. "Harold is angry now. In time, he may accept the judge's decision and move on." Seeing her unconvinced expression, he added, "But until then, you and Joseph are safe at the Circle O. I promise you that." The weeks following the hearing brought a gradual easing of tension. Harold remained in Rawhide, running the store, but made no further attempts to approach Lillian or the ranch. Sheriff Mills reported that he seemed to be drinking less and focusing on the business, more a promising sign. As autumn deepened toward winter, life at the Circle O settled into a comfortable routine. Lillian's role expanded beyond helping Mrs. Abernathy with cooking. She began keeping the ranch's books as well, discovering she had a talent for figures that Isaiah readily appreciated. Joseph thrived, growing stronger each day, beginning to smile and coo at those who held him. And through it all, the connection between Isaiah and Lillian continued to deepen. Neither spoke openly of their growing feelings, both aware of the complications her recent widowhood, the gossip such a relationship would inevitably cause, the practical concerns of raising a child that wasn't his. Yet the attraction between them was undeniable, evident in lingering glances and the way they found reasons to be in each other's company. One crisp November evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, they sat together before the fire in the main house. Mrs. Abernathy had retired early with a headache, and Joseph was asleep in a cradle Isaiah had surprised Lillian with the week before, crafted by his own hands from pine wood. "You've made quite a difference around here," Isaiah said, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "The books haven't been this organized since." "Well, ever," Lillian smiled, setting aside her mending. "I enjoy the work. It keeps my mind occupied." She glanced over at Joseph's cradle. "And it feels good to contribute to earn my keep." "You do far more than earn your keep," Isaiah said quietly. "This place feels like a home now, not just a ranch." Their eyes met across the space between them, the air suddenly charged with unspoken emotions. Isaiah cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "I've been meaning to ask, what are your plans, now that the matter with Harold seems settled?" Lillian's hand stilled in her lap. "Plans? For the future," he clarified. "For you and Joseph." She was silent for a long moment, watching the snow falling outside the window. "I haven't thought much beyond surviving each day," she admitted finally. "When Thomas died, everything seemed so uncertain, then with Harold's claims." She shook her head. "I suppose I should consider our future more seriously now." "You could stay here," Isaiah said, his voice carefully neutral. "Work as my bookkeeper officially. The cabin is yours for as long as you want it." Lillian studied his face, trying to read his true meaning. "As your employee, you mean?" Isaiah stood, moving to the window to watch the snow, his back to her. "If that's what you want." She rose as well, crossing the room to stand beside him. "What do you want, Isaiah?" He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I want you to stay," he said simply. "Not as an employee, as—" He struggled to find the right words. "As what?" she prompted gently. "I'm falling in love with you, Lillian," he confessed, the words rushing out as if he'd held them back too long. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still mourning Thomas. I know Joseph needs time to grow up knowing his father through your memories. But I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel." Lillian's heart raced at his declaration. "Isaiah, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that when you think about your future, I hope you might consider one that includes me." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness but of a complicated mixture of emotions: grief for what she'd lost, gratitude for his understanding, and yes, a growing love she'd been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. "Thomas will always be Joseph's father," she said softly. "Nothing can change that. And a part of me will always honor what we had together." She reached out, taking Isaiah's hand in hers. "But I can't deny what I've come to feel for you. You've shown me kindness when I needed it most, strength when I had none left, and patience I never expected." Isaiah's fingers tightened around hers. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I need time," she answered honestly, "but my heart is already moving forward even when my mind tells me it's too soon." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I can wait," he promised. "As long as you need." The moment was interrupted by a soft cry from Joseph's cradle. Lillian moved to tend to him, lifting the baby and cradling him against her shoulder. Isaiah watched them, his expression tender. "He has his father's eyes," he observed. "Yes." Lillian smiled down at her son. "But I think he has my stubbornness." "Poor child," Isaiah teased, moving closer to gently touch Joseph's cheek. The baby grabbed his finger, holding it with surprising strength. "He'll need it, growing up on a ranch." The three of them stood together as the snow continued to fall outside, forming a picture of what could be not a replacement for what Lillian had lost, but something new and precious in its own right. December brought heavier snows and the anticipation of Christmas. Isaiah rode into Rawhide weekly for supplies and mail, often returning with small surprises for Lillian and Joseph, a book of poetry, a colorful rattle, fresh oranges shipped in from California at exorbitant cost. Each gesture further endeared him to Lillian, whose feelings continued to deepen despite her initial caution. On one such trip, just a week before Christmas, Isaiah encountered Harold Cooper outside the general store. To his surprise, Harold nodded politely, even stopping to exchange pleasantries about the weather. "How are Lillian and the boy?" Harold asked, his tone neutral. Isaiah regarded him warily. "They're well. Joseph is growing quickly." "Good, good." Harold shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, O'Malley. I've been thinking about my behavior, the things I said and did after Thomas died." He shook his head. "The fever took my brother, and I think it addled my mind for a while too. I'm not proud of how I acted." Isaiah studied the man carefully, looking for signs of deception but finding none. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm sure Lillian would too." "Would you tell her something for me?" Harold asked. "Tell her I'm sorry, and tell her I've set aside a portion of the store's profits as the judge ordered. It's not much yet, but it's rightfully hers and Joseph's." "I'll tell her," Isaiah promised, still surprised by the apparent change in Harold's demeanor. Harold nodded again. "Merry Christmas, O'Malley, to you and your family." As Isaiah rode back to the ranch, he pondered the exchange. People could change, he'd seen it before. Perhaps losing the court case had been the wake-up call Harold needed. Still, he couldn't help feeling uneasy about the sudden transformation. He shared the encounter with Lillian that evening as they decorated a small pine tree Isaiah had cut down for the main house. "He seemed genuinely remorseful," Isaiah concluded, "and he mentioned money set aside for you and Joseph from the store." Lillian's hand stilled on the paper star she was crafting. "I don't know what to think. He seemed so determined before." "People can surprise you," Isaiah said, adjusting a candle on one of the branches. "Sometimes for the better. And sometimes not," she countered softly. "My father used to say that a leopard doesn't change its spots." "Well, we'll be cautious," Isaiah conceded. "But if he's truly had a change of heart, it would make things easier for everyone, especially Joseph as he grows up. Harold is his only blood relative now." Lillian nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. It would be better for Joseph to know his uncle if Harold can be trusted." She finished the star and handed it to Isaiah. "Would you put this on top? I can't reach." As he placed the star, their hands brushed and he caught her gaze. In the light of the fire and the candles on the tree, her eyes shimmered with emotions he was beginning to recognize: warmth, affection, and a growing desire that matched his own. "Lillian," he began, his voice husky. "Yes," she whispered, not moving away as he stepped closer. "May I kiss you?" The question was simple, direct, like the man himself. Her answer was to raise herself on tiptoes, her hands coming to rest on his chest as their lips met for the first time. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration, but deepened as Isaiah's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "I've wanted you to," she admitted, a blush coloring her cheeks. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Are you sure this isn't too soon?" Lillian considered the question seriously. "I loved Thomas," she said finally. "Part of me always will. But life is short and unpredictable. His death taught me that. I don't want to waste whatever time we have pretending I don't care for you when I do." Isaiah kissed her again, this time with more certainty. "I love you, Lillian Cooper. You and Joseph both." "And we love you," she replied, her heart full with the truth of it. Christmas at the Circle was a joyous affair. Isaiah closed the ranch for the day, giving all the hands time off. though most had nowhere to go and joined the celebration in the main house. Mrs. Abernathy outdid herself with the feast, and Lillian had baked pies and cookies for days in preparation. Isaiah presented Lillian with a delicate silver locket containing a tiny portrait of Joseph, which he'd commissioned from a traveling artist who'd passed through Rawhide. For Joseph, he had a hand-carved wooden horse, the first of what he promised would be a complete stable of toys as the boy grew older. Lillian's gift to Isaiah was a new ledger book, bound in fine leather with his initials embossed on the cover, and a knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes. Simple gifts, but given with such obvious care that Isaiah treasured them immediately. As they sat together that evening after all the festivities had ended and Joseph slept peacefully in his cradle, Isaiah took Lillian's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled. "Perhaps, but I've been thinking about us, about our future." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "I know it's soon. Too soon, probably, by most people's reckoning. But I can't imagine my life without you and Joseph in it now." Lillian's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," he continued, opening the pouch to reveal a simple gold band set with a single small diamond. "I know you need time, and there would be talk in town about the widow Cooper remarrying so quickly, but I wanted you to know my intentions." "Isaiah," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I want to be a father to Joseph," he said earnestly. "Not to replace Thomas in his memory, but to give him the guidance and love every boy deserves. And I want to be your husband, Lillian, when you're ready. Whether that's next month or next year or longer." She stared at the ring, emotions warring within her. The proper period of mourning for a widow was at least a year, sometimes two. To remarry sooner would indeed cause talk, perhaps even scandal. Yet her heart urged her forward toward the future Isaiah offered. "I don't need to wait a year," she said finally, looking up to meet his gaze. "Perhaps a few more months out of respect for Thomas. But yes, Isaiah O'Malley, yes, I will marry you." His face lit with such joy that she couldn't help but laugh as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant to be there all along. He gathered her in his arms, their kiss a promise of all that was to come. "We'll make it official in the spring," he murmured against her hair. "When the snow melts and the land wakes up again." "A new beginning," she agreed, nestling against his chest. Neither could have known that their newfound happiness would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. January brought bitter cold and more snow than Rawhide had seen in years. The ranch hands struggled to keep the cattle fed and protected from the worst of the storms, while Lillian and Mrs. Abernathy ensured the house remained warm and the pantry stocked. Isaiah continued his weekly trips to town, though Lillian worried each time he rode out. On the last such journey of the month, he returned with troubling news. "Harold's gone," he announced as he stamped snow from his boots in the entryway. Lillian looked up from her mending, alarmed. "Gone? What do you mean?" "Left town 3 days ago, according to Sheriff Mills. Sold the store to Jenkins and rode out, saying he had business in Carson City." Isaiah hung his coat by the fire to dry. "The strange thing is, he withdrew all the money from the bank before he left, including the funds he'd set aside for you and Joseph." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran through Lillian. "You don't think he's coming back, do you?" Isaiah frowned, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. "Hard to say. Mills didn't seem concerned. Said Harold mentioned investments he wanted to make." "I don't like it," Lillian said, setting aside her work. "That sudden apology, then disappearing with all the money." "It could be nothing," Isaiah reassured her, though his expression remained troubled. "But I've asked the hands to keep an extra watch just in case." February passed without incident. and as March arrived with the first hints of spring, Harold Cooper's departure became just another piece of gossip in Rawhide's past. Lillian and Isaiah began making plans for their April wedding, a small affair to be held at the ranch with Judge Wilson officiating. Joseph, now nearly 6 months old, was thriving. He had begun to sit up on his own and was attempting to crawl, much to Lillian's delight and Isaiah's amusement. The bond between the child and the man who would soon be his stepfather grew stronger each day, with Joseph lighting up whenever Isaiah entered the room. One mild afternoon in late March, Lillian decided to take advantage of the pleasant weather and hang laundry outside rather than by the fire. Joseph was napping, and Mrs. Abernathy had gone into town with one of the ranch hands to purchase supplies for the wedding feast. She was pinning sheets to the line, enjoying the feel of sunshine on her face after the long winter, when she heard a horse approaching from the direction of the road. Assuming it was Isaiah returning from checking the south pasture, she didn't turn immediately. "Nearly done here," she called over her shoulder. "Joseph's still sleeping, so we have a few minutes of peace." When no response came, she glanced back and froze. Harold Cooper sat astride his horse not 20 feet away, a rifle resting across his saddle. "Hello, Lillian," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You're looking well." She took a step back, instinctively moving toward the house where Joseph slept. "Harold, we heard you'd left for Carson City." "I did, made some inquiries there." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting things I learned about legal rights, about guardianship, about how a judge's ruling can be overturned with the right influence." Lillian's heart pounded in her chest. "Isaiah will be back any minute." "Whatever you're planning, O'Malley's checking the south pasture. I passed his men on my way and told them I was here to see you about some money from the store sale. Very trusting fellows." Harold dismounted, keeping the rifle in hand. "Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I've just come for what's mine." "Nothing here is yours," Lillian said firmly, though fear made her voice waver. "My nephew is," Harold countered. "Blood is blood, Lillian. Thomas would have wanted his son raised by family, not some cowboy you've taken up with indecently soon after his death." Anger flashed through her fear. "You dare speak of decency after what you tried to do?" Harold's expression hardened. "I was distraught after Thomas died. I made mistakes, but I've had time to think, to plan. I've sold everything here. I'm heading to California to start fresh, and Joseph is coming with me." "Never," Lillian stated, backing toward the house. "Joseph stays with me." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Harold warned, raising the rifle slightly. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will take my nephew." Lillian turned and ran for the house, her heart in her throat. She could hear Harold following, his boots heavy on the ground behind her. She reached the porch just as a cry came from inside. Joseph was awake. She burst through the door, slamming it behind her and dropping the bar into place. It wouldn't hold long against a determined man, but it might buy her precious seconds. She rushed to Joseph's cradle, scooping him up and hushing him as she looked frantically around for a weapon, an escape route, anything. The window. She could climb out the back window with Joseph and run for the barn. There were rifles there and horses, if she could just get to them. A crash came from the front door as Harold threw his weight against it. The wood groaned but held. Joseph, sensing her fear, began to wail in earnest. "S-H-H, darling, S-H-H," she murmured, moving quickly toward the back of the house. "We need to be very quiet now." She had just reached the rear window when she heard the distinctive sound of a rifle being fired, followed immediately by the splintering of the front door lock. Harold had shot it out. Panic surged through her as she struggled to open the window with one hand while holding Joseph with the other. The door flew open behind her. "Stop right there, Lillian." She froze, then slowly turned to face her brother-in-law. Joseph clutched protectively to her chest. "Please, Harold. Don't do this. He's just a baby." "He's my brother's son," Harold said, stepping into the house, rifle still in hand. "And he's coming with me to California. You can visit when he's older if you behave yourself." "He needs his mother," Lillian pleaded, tears filling her eyes. "Please don't separate us." Something like regret flickered across Harold's face, quickly replaced by determination. "It's already decided. Now give him to me and I promise I won't hurt you." "No." Lillian backed away until she hit the wall. "I won't let you take him." Harold raised the rifle, pointing it directly at her. "I don't want to use this, but I will. The boy comes with me, one way or another." Time seemed to slow as Lillian stared down the barrel of the rifle. Joseph's cries had subsided to whimpers, as if even he sensed the gravity of the moment. She thought of Isaiah, somewhere on the ranch, unaware of the danger, of the future they had planned together, of the life Joseph deserved. Harold Cooper. The voice from the doorway was like thunder in the small room. "Drop that rifle now." Isaiah stood in the entrance, his own rifle leveled at Harold's back. His face was a mask of cold fury that transformed his usually gentle features into something dangerous. Harold tensed, but didn't lower his weapon. "This isn't your concern, O'Malley. This is family business." "Lillian and Joseph are my family now," Isaiah replied, his voice deadly calm. "And you're threatening them with a rifle in my house. Drop it. I won't ask again." The tension in the room was unbearable as Harold remained frozen, rifle still pointed at Lillian. She could see the calculations running behind his eyes, whether he could shoot her or grab Joseph before Isaiah fired, whether Isaiah would actually pull the trigger. "You won't shoot me in the back," Harold said finally. "Not in cold blood. You're too righteous for that." "Try me," Isaiah replied, and something in his voice must have convinced Harold, for the man slowly lowered his rifle. "Now set it on the floor and kick it away," Isaiah ordered. Harold complied, his movements stiff with suppressed rage. As the rifle skittered across the wooden planks, Isaiah moved further into the room, keeping his own weapon trained on Harold. "Lillian, take Joseph and go to the main house. Send one of the hands for the sheriff." She nodded, relief making her legs weak as she hurried past both men, clutching Joseph tightly to her chest. Harold watched her go, his expression a mixture of anger and defeat. "You've got no right," he said to Isaiah once Lillian had gone. "That boy is my blood." "And he's her son," Isaiah countered. "The law has already decided this matter, Cooper. Judge Wilson ruled that Joseph stays with his mother. Laws can be changed or broken." Harold's gaze flickered to his discarded rifle. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Isaiah's voice was implacable. "You're leaving Rawhide today, and you're not coming back. If I ever see you near Lillian or Joseph again, I won't hesitate to defend them by any means necessary. Do you understand?" The stare-down lasted several long moments before Harold finally nodded, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "You can't watch them forever, O'Malley." "I don't need to. Lillian is stronger than you think." Isaiah gestured with his rifle toward the door. "Now move. We're going to wait for the sheriff together." Sheriff Mills arrived within the hour, taking Harold into custody for attempted kidnapping and threatening Lillian with a deadly weapon. The evidence was clear, and with Isaiah and Lillian's testimony, Judge Wilson sentenced Harold to 5 years in the territorial prison the following week. As they left the courthouse after the sentencing, Lillian leaned against Isaiah, emotionally exhausted. "It's really over now, isn't it?" "Yes," he assured her, his arms strong around her shoulders. "Harold won't be able to threaten you or Joseph again. By the time he's released, Joseph will be old enough that no court would separate him from his mother." She looked up at him, love and gratitude in her eyes. "You saved us. If you hadn't returned when you did." "I wasn't supposed to be back so soon," Isaiah admitted, but something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, just a feeling that I needed to get back to the house. He kissed her forehead gently. I'll always come back to you, Lillian. Always. 2 weeks later, on a perfect April morning with wildflowers blooming across the Nevada landscape, Lillian Cooper became Lillian O'Malley in a simple ceremony at the Circle O Ranch. Judge Wilson officiated with Mrs. Abernathy, Luke, and several ranch hands as witnesses. Joseph, dressed in a tiny suit Isaiah had ordered specially from San Francisco, watched from Mrs. Abernathy's arms, occasionally babbling as if offering his own commentary on the proceedings. Lillian wore a new dress of pale blue, with flowers in her hair instead of a veil. As she stood beside Isaiah, speaking the vows that would bind them together, she felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way she hadn't expected to find again after Thomas's death. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Judge Wilson declared with a smile. You may kiss your bride, Mr. O'Malley. Isaiah didn't need to be told twice. He gathered Lillian in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made several of the tough ranch hands clear their throats awkwardly and look away. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music provided by one of the cowboys who played a passable fiddle, and dancing in the yard that had been cleared for the occasion. As twilight descended, Isaiah found Lillian sitting on the porch, watching the festivities with Joseph sleeping against her shoulder. Happy, Mrs. O'Malley? He asked, settling beside her. Very, she confirmed, leaning against him contentedly. Though I think I'm still getting used to the name. You have a lifetime to practice, he murmured, kissing her temple. She smiled, looking out over their ranch now in a very real sense. A year ago, I never could have imagined being here, being this happy again. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. Life has a way of surprising us, Isaiah said, taking her free hand in his. Sometimes in terrible ways, but sometimes. He squeezed her fingers gently. Sometimes in wonderful ones too. As the stars emerged in the clear Nevada sky, Lillian thought about the journey that had brought her here from Missouri to Rawhide as a mail-order bride, through love and loss and danger, to this moment of newfound happiness. Nothing was certain in this frontier world, but with Isaiah beside her and Joseph in her arms, she faced the future with hope rather than fear. I love you, she said simply, turning to meet her husband's gaze. His smile was all the answer she needed. Epilogue 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the Circle O Ranch, now nearly twice the size it had been when Lillian first arrived. The main house had been expanded as well, with a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Joseph, now 5 years old, chased his 3-year-old brother Thomas around the yard while their father watched from the corral where he was breaking a new horse. Lillian stood on the porch, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child grew. At nearly 7 months along, she found the heat particularly challenging, but the doctor in Carson City had assured her that both she and the baby were healthy. Mama, look, Joseph called, proudly displaying a toad he'd captured from near the water trough. Can I keep him? In a jar with air holes and plenty of water, she replied with a smile. And only for 1 day before you release him back where you found him. Joseph's face lit up. Yes, madam. He dashed off to find a suitable container, his little brother toddling after him on chubby legs. Isaiah finished with the horse and joined her on the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. How are you feeling today? He asked, his hand joining hers on her stomach. Like I'm carrying a future bronco rider, she laughed as the baby kicked. He's been active all morning. Could be a she, Isaiah reminded her. Might be nice to have a little girl this time. Either way, this one already has your energy. She leaned against him, content despite the heat and her ungainly state, 5 years had brought many changes to the circle. The ranch had prospered under their joint management, with Lillian's head for figures complementing Isaiah's practical knowledge of cattle and horses. Joseph had grown into a bright, curious boy who adored his adoptive father, though they had been careful to keep Thomas Cooper's memory alive through stories and the few photographs they possessed. Harold Cooper remained a distant shadow, still serving his prison sentence. They had received word that with good behavior he might be released next year, but neither Isaiah nor Lillian feared his return. Rawhide had made it clear whose side the town stood on, and Harold would find no allies should he choose to make trouble again. "Luke says the north pasture is ready for the new herd," Isaiah said, changing the subject. "We should be able to move them next week." Lillian nodded, already calculating the additional income the expanded herd would bring. "That's good timing. The bank loan for the new barn will be due in October." Isaiah smiled, shaking his head in admiration. "I don't know what I'd do without you keeping track of all that. Probably forget to pay the hands and end up doing all the work yourself," she teased. He laughed, pulling her closer for a kiss. "Probably." From the yard came the sound of childish squabbling, followed by Thomas's wail. Lillian sighed, starting to move toward the commotion, but Isaiah stopped her. "I'll handle it. You rest." He pressed another quick kiss to her lips before heading to sort out whatever dispute had arisen between their sons. Lillian watched him go, her heart full. She had loved twice in her life, differently each time, but genuinely both times. Thomas Cooper had given her Joseph and brought her to Nevada, changing the course of her life. Isaiah had shown her that love could be found again, even after devastating loss, and had given her a family and home beyond anything she could have imagined. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting golden light across the ranch, Lillian O'Malley offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the man who had declared that she belonged to no one, only to win her heart completely, and for the future they continued to build together in this wild, beautiful land.